Why does everyone hate Adrien Broner? Adrien Broner was once hailed as the next big thing in boxing, a young prodigy with the world at his feet. His brash confidence, flashy style, and natural talent had many people convinced that he was going to dominate the sport for years to come. But somewhere along the way, things went wrong. His career, once filled with promise, took a sharp turn, and his behavior both in and out of the ring came just as controversial as his boxing skills were impressive. What happened to the fighter who was supposed to be the heir to Floyd Mayweather's throne today? We're diving deep into Broner's rise and fall, exploring not just his boxing career, but the personal issues, legal troubles, and self-destructive behavior that LED fans and pundits to sour on him. Was it his cocky attitude or his inability to back it up in the ring? Was it the legal mess he found himself in? Or was it a lack of discipline? We'll explore it all and more. So, stick around. Adrien Broner was born on July 28, 1989, in Cincinnati, Ohio, into a challenging environment, raised in a tough neighborhood. He was no stranger to adversity. However, it was boxing that provided him an escape, a way out of the harsh streets. Growing up, he was introduced to the sport by his father, and it didn't take long for Broner to show the world his natural gift for the sport as a young fighter. His speed, power, and agility stood out, and it quickly became clear that he had potential beyond what most of his peers could imagine. Broner's early years in boxing were marked by his rapid rise through the ranks. By his late teens, he was already sparring with seasoned professionals, and his talent was undeniable. He made a name for himself in the amateur ranks, and although he had Olympic aspirations, he never made it to the Olympic team. Despite this, his career was already moving in the right direction, and he turned professional at just 18 years old in 2008. Broner made his debut as a professional, and it didn't take long for him to start making waves in the boxing world. His flashy style and brash personality caught the attention of fans and critics alike. He won his first world title in 2011 at the age of 22, defeating Vicente Escobedo for the WBO super featherweight title. This victory marked the beginning of what many hoped would be a legendary career. Broner wasn't content with just one world title, though his ambition was clear, and he moved up in weight classes, capturing titles across multiple divisions. In 2012, he won the WBC lightweight title by defeating Antonio DeMartino, further solidifying his status as a rising star in the boxing world from there. He moved up to welterweight and continued his dominance, even if his performances began to show signs of inconsistency. But it wasn't just his boxing skills that set Broner apart. It was his persona. Early in his career, he adopted the nickname The Problem, a moniker that reflected both his talent and his confident, sometimes cocky attitude. He would often refer to himself as the future of boxing, and his swagger and self-assurance made him an instant draw. "I'm the next Floyd Mayweather," he said in interviews, drawing comparisons between himself and the undefeated legend. Fans couldn't help but see the similarities. Broner had the same flashy style, the same ability to talk trash, and the same level of self-belief that made Mayweather a superstar. "I'm a bad man. I know I'm a bad man," Broner once said in an interview, giving fans a glimpse into his larger-than-life personality. His confidence wasn't just about talk. It was backed up by his performances in the ring. Broner showcased a unique combination of speed, power, and finesse. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a showman. His flashy outfits, his trash talk, and his ability to back it up with wins made him a crowd favorite. He wasn't afraid to be bold. He wasn't shy about calling out the best in the sport. In one of his most famous quotes, Broner declared, "I'm the future of boxing. You can either get with it or get left behind." His self-assurance was unshakable, and it resonated with fans who saw in him the potential to take boxing to new heights early on. He had everything: talent, charisma, and the drive to make it to the top. Despite his early success, there were already hints of what was to come. While Broner was winning titles, he was also starting to attract attention for his brash behavior. His penchant for trash talk, combined with his growing reputation as a show-off. He began to rub some fans the wrong way, but at this point, his talent and performances were enough to keep most of the criticism at bay. After all, when you're winning world titles and knocking out opponents in style, people are more likely to overlook your attitude. Adrien Broner was without a doubt a rising star. His early career was filled with promise and potential, and his flashy persona made him one of the most talked-about figures in boxing. But as we all know, it's not just talent that defines a fighter. It's how they handle the spotlight, both in and out of the ring. At this stage, though, it seemed like Broner had everything going for him. He was on top of the world, and his career was set to soar even higher. But the truth is, this is where the story starts to get complicated. What happened to the fighter who was supposed to be the next big thing in boxing? Stay tuned, because things were about to take a dramatic turn. As Adrien Broner's career progressed, so did his reputation, though not in the way many expected. The young fighter's brash confidence, once charming and entertaining, began to turn off fans' opponents and the boxing community. His cocky attitude, combined with his increasingly erratic behavior, became a defining feature of his public persona. From the very beginning, Broner was never shy about promoting himself. He would often make bold statements in interviews, claiming he was the future of boxing, the next big thing. But as his success grew, so did his trash-talking and willingness to provoke others. His style of promoting fights wasn't based on respect for opponents, but rather an exaggerated level of arrogance that seemed to rub people the wrong way. He'd boast about being the best and show little regard for his rivals' skills or accomplishments. On social media, Broner's antics only intensified the controversy. He was quick to engage in online spats with both fans and fellow fighters, making inflammatory remarks or mocking anyone who dared to criticize him. His Instagram and Twitter posts became platforms for his defiance, often filled with confrontational messages and videos portraying him as untouchable. Many fans were entertained at first, finding his over-the-top personality amusing, but soon his online behavior became synonymous with immaturity, often overshadowing his actual talent. Broner's actions outside the ring were equally problematic. There were several public incidents involving altercations with other fighters, the media, and even fans. One particularly memorable incident was when Broner confronted a journalist in the press room after a fight, exchanging insults and engaging in a heated verbal confrontation. His inability to handle criticism, engage in a mature manner, made him increasingly difficult to support for many fans. Instead of seeing him as a charismatic and confident fighter, they began to view him as disrespectful and out of touch with what it meant to be a true champion. However, the first major blow to Broner's reputation came in December 2013, when he faced off against Maidana in a bout that would prove to be a major turning point in his career. Leading up to the fight, Broner was at his most confident. He frequently mocked Maidana's fighting style and skills, arrogantly dismissing the Argentine as a worthy opponent. "I'm gonna knock him out." "No question about it," Broner confidently said in the build-up to the fight. This kind of talk only increased the pressure on Broner, and when the fight came, it was clear that Maidana had other plans. Maidana entered the ring that night ready to fight, and he quickly proved that Broner's cocky words had been hollow from the very first round. Broner was stunned by Maidana's relentless power and aggression. The fight ended in a dominant win for Maidana, who secured a unanimous decision after knocking Broner down twice. During the bout, Broner's inability to adjust to Maidana's attack and his failure to counter the onslaught raised serious questions about his skill and commitment to the sport. The loss was a major reality. Check one that shook his confidence and forced him to reconsider his approach to both boxing and life outside of the ring. "I didn't lose, I just didn't win," Broner said in a post-fight interview, continuing his defiant attitude. This statement typified his unwillingness to acknowledge his flaws, choosing instead to place the blame elsewhere instead of reflecting on his shortcomings or giving credit to Maidana for a well-executed game plan. Broner arrogantly dismissed the loss as if it were simply an anomaly. Fans and critics alike were stunned by his inability to process the loss in a mature way. His refusal to admit defeat was jarring, and it made many question whether Broner truly had the mental fortitude to be a champion, the highest level in the aftermath of the Maidana fight. Broner's bravado only escalated. Instead of working hard to improve and come back stronger, he continued to engage in trash talk and childish antics. His disregard for the sport, his inability to accept criticism, and his refusal to humble himself made it clear to many that he wasn't fully committed to the grind that boxing required. His performances in the ring began to reflect this, as he would often fail to perform to the expectations that had once been set for him. As Broner continued to progress in his career, his unrepentant arrogance, combined with his underperformance in key fights, created a growing divide between him and his supporters. Fans who had once cheered for the brash young fighter were now starting to question whether he had the dedication and work ethic to back up his words. He had the talent, no doubt, but his mental and emotional shortcomings were becoming increasingly apparent in one of his most famous quotes. Following a tough fight, Broner said, "They don't want to see me win. They want to see me lose. But that's all right. I'm still gonna be here." His words perfectly encapsulated his attitude toward his critics. Instead of accepting responsibility for his mistakes, Broner chose to play the victim and blame external factors for his struggles. His inability to grow from his losses both inside and outside the ring ultimately turned what was once a promising career into a cautionary tale of what happens when talent is overshadowed by arrogance and immaturity. As his career continued, it became clear that Broner's attitude and boo behavior were more of a problem than anyone had anticipated. What was once seen as confidence was now being viewed as petulance. His inconsistency in the ring and his failure to learn from his defeats made it impossible to ignore the cracks in his once promising career. The fight with Maidana had exposed his flaws in a way that fans and pundits couldn't unsee, and it set the stage for the continued decline of the fighter who was once seen as boxing's next big star. Adrien Broner's decline from boxing prodigy to a controversial figure wasn't just marked by his erratic performances inside the ring, but was also severely impacted by his personal and legal trouble. His actions outside of boxing began to overshadow his boxing career, and the combination of legal issues and a deteriorating reputation only deepened the spiral of his fall from grace. By the time Broner suffered the devastating loss to Maidana, in 2013, his career was already beginning to unravel. He had the talent, but his behavior both in and out of the ring was starting to take a toll. Legal issues became a major part of his story, and his struggles with the law only fueled the negative perception surrounding him. Over the years, Broner faced multiple arrests for assault, public disturbances, and other criminal activities. One of his most high-profile run-ins with the law was in 2014 when he was arrested for felony robbery after allegedly stealing a woman's phone. This was just one in a series of legal troubles which seemed to follow him wherever he went. In addition to this, Broner was often seen in public, making disruptive attention, grabbing statements, or getting involved in altercations. His behavior became a running joke in the media. Instead of being seen as a role model or a disciplined athlete, he became known for his public outbursts and arrests. These incidents tarnished his image and turned him into a figure that many fans who once supported him began to view as irresponsible and unprofessional. It was difficult for people to take him seriously as a top-tier fighter when his personal life appeared so chaotic and filled with poor decisions. Fans were frustrated by his seeming lack of maturity and respect for the sport, and this only amplified the disdain for him in the ring. Broner's performances were just as inconsistent, following the Maidana loss, which was a harsh wake-up call. He struggled to regain his former momentum, while he did secure victories in some of his following fights. Many were far from convincing. For instance, in his fight against Paulie Malignaggi in 2013, a decision victory that was seen as controversial. By many, Broner displayed a lack of the crisp, calculated skill he had shown earlier in his career. Instead of building on his success, Broner's performances seemed more about surviving than dominating. There was no sign of the fighter who had once promised so much, no sign of the discipline, focus, or strategic development that was expected of a rising star in the sport. Critics began to point out the growing gap between Broner's potential and his actual accomplishments. He has the talent to be great, but he lacks the discipline to get there. One boxing analyst remarked. Others, including prominent figures like Floyd Mayweather Jr., expressed their frustration with Broner's inability to stay focused and committed. Mayweather, who had taken Broner under his wing in the early stages of his career, voiced his disappointment over Broner's lack of discipline, stating he has the potential to be one of the best, but he doesn't take it seriously. While Mayweather's mentorship seemed like it could help guide Broner to greatness, it became clear that Broner's distractions outside of the ring were beginning to overshadow any chance of true greatness. In addition to his inconsistent performances in the ring, Broner also faced mounting criticism for his attitude. It wasn't just his lack of focus that worried critics. It was his refusal to grow and evolve as a fighter. Instead of using his losses as learning experiences, he often dismissed them as flukes. After a disappointing performance against Sean Porter in 2015, which many saw as another missed opportunity, Broner shrugged off the criticism and continued to blame everyone but himself for his shortcomings. People can say what they want, but I'm still here, Broner said in an interview. Following the fight, his inability to accept responsibility for his own flaws made it clear to many that he wasn't committed to improving. It wasn't just the critics who were calling out Broner's lack of discipline. His fans were growing frustrated too. The same fans who had once been captivated by his cocky persona and flashy boxing style began to question whether he had the heart and work ethic to truly succeed. The problem was becoming more of a liability than a champion, and his inconsistency in the ring was further evidence of this. It was clear that his career had plateaued, and there was no sign of him reaching the heights he had once promised. As Broner continued to hop between weight classes and put together sporadic victories, his potential seemed to slip further away. Instead of building on his early success, he was stuck in a cycle of missed opportunities and poor performances. It seemed as if his natural talent was never enough to overcome his lack of discipline and his inability to handle the pressures of being a professional athlete. The problem with Broner is not his talent, it's his attitude, said one seasoned boxing analyst. He's the kind of guy who could be great, but he's constantly in his own way. This summed up the core of Broner's downfall, his own inability to stay grounded and committed to his craft. For a fighter who once looked like the future of boxing, it became increasingly clear that Broner had squandered the opportunities that were given to him. Broner's story became one of what could have been. His once promising career was derailed by legal troubles, poor decisions, and a lack of mental fortitude. The fighter, who was supposed to dominate the sport, ended up as a cautionary tale, a symbol of wasted potential, and a reminder of how arrogance coupled with personal issues can undermine even the most talented individual. Fans who once saw him as the future of boxing were left wondering what could have been if he had only stayed focused and disciplined. Adrien Broner's career and public persona were built on one central idea: confidence. But over time, his bravado crossed into arrogance, and his public image began to clash with his actual abilities and behavior. When Broner first rose to prominence, his over-the-top persona, bold, brash, and unapologetically arrogant, was part of what made him appealing. He was brimming with self-belief, talking big and trash-talking even bigger, claiming he was the next Floyd Mayweather. But as his performances became less impressive and more inconsistent, that same bravado started to feel hollow. Broner's trash talk, once entertaining, began to backfire as he failed to back it up. His online behavior made matters worse. He frequently posted rants on social media, provoking fans, critics, and fighters alike, instead of focusing on his craft. Broner used social media as a platform for attention, grabbing outbursts. One infamous example was when he posted a rant. "They can say what they want, but I'm still here. I'm still the best." His inability to accept criticism or reflect on his performance alienated fans, turning his confidence into something increasingly unappealing. Beyond his social media antics, Broner's strained relationships with other fighters added to his downfall. His relationship with Floyd Mayweather Jr. Once his mentor soured as Mayweather expressed frustration over Broner's lack of discipline. Mayweather said, "I tried to help him, but it's up to him to want to be great." This mirrored the frustration that others in the boxing community felt, as Broner's natural talent was overshadowed by his refusal to improve. Broner's public feuds extended to other fighters, like Shawn Porter, whom he frequently disrespected. His trash talk was matched only by his underperformance in key fight. Instead of focusing on his craft, he was more interested in maintaining his status as the villain of the sport, which made his losses even harder to swallow. For fans and critics alike, the public persona of the problem became increasingly disconnected from Broner's actual performance. His antics, both online and in person, detracted from what should have been a stellar career. His lack of discipline and disrespect for the sport and his peers made it difficult for fans to continue supporting him. His potential was clear, but his self-destructive behavior ultimately overshadowed it, making him a cautionary tale in the sport of boxing.